What does the Care Court bill do that hasn't been done in the past?
It addresses what's happening on our streets and sidewalks, particularly with the most vexing issue, mental health. People that are out there, we see every single day. People with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, people with paranoia, most, let's be candid, self-medicating with drug or alcohol addictions. And we see this manifested in California like no other state. It's not unique to California. It's just worse here. And it's a vexing issue that we haven't been able to address ever since we dismantled our behavioral health system over half a century ago. Everybody's been talking about the good old days. We've done nothing about it measurably. Care Court is the first demonstrable step to address the issue of what's happening on the streets.
A lot of people, as you know, fed up with the homeless crisis in California. As you mentioned, it's an issue from Los Angeles to San Francisco. How effective do you think this is going to be?
Well, it comes with additional supports. I want to put this in perspective. As a former mayor, I don't think this, I know this, I lived it. As a former mayor of a county, the state of California was nowhere to be found on homeless policy. I never looked to criticize or complain to Governor Schwarzenegger when he was governor and I was mayor, or Governor Gray Davis when he was governor. Never even thought about it. The state of California had nothing to do with the issue. When I got here, there was no plan, no strategy, no accountability, nothing. Today, just 3.5 years later, $14.7 billion of new money. $3.5 billion specifically for board and care and mental health support. Money, unprecedented money to buy hotels and motels all up and down the state. Over 13,000 units we've procured in the last 2 years. And now new supports to address this issue that we haven't been able to address. And that is, what do you do with someone that doesn't want help, that's out there screaming and yelling to themselves, that may not have their clothes on, that may come in and out of the criminal justice system or the emergency room for years and years and years, and that's Care Court. So we're stacking strategies and approaches, accountability, transparency for the taxpayer, for the individuals, for the cities and counties, and finally a plan and support coming from California and the state.
It starts in 7 counties. Hope is to get it across the state. Do you see this as a national model?
Well, I think it is. I think it is, if we get it right. And that's why we're starting small. We have 58 counties, but we start with 7. Large counties, smaller counties, rural counties, larger, big urban counties. And we have real resources, one-time startup expenses. We have an implementation strategy that gives us time. We have a partner in the 3rd branch of government, and this is what makes us unique. The court system itself is embracing enthusiastically this approach, and it's simple. A referral, it could be a family member, it could be a first responder. Refer an individual. They're evaluated. Once they're evaluated, there's an actual care plan that's established. There's a public defender due process, but a court order to address the individual's needs, and a 12 to 24-month process to achieve success. Nothing like this has ever existed in this state, and we don't know of any other model like this anywhere in the country.
This, comes with some opposition. I want to read you something from the Human Rights Watch. They say Care Court isn't about care at all. They write, it plays on prejudices against people who are unhoused and living with mental health conditions to create a coercive system of court-ordered treatment when we know that involuntary treatment is ineffective and inhumane. What's your response?
Well, what's inhumane and ineffective is the status quo. How many people have died reading that same statement going back 30, 40, 50, 60 years? Where's the compassion in someone? We're stepping over on the streets and sidewalks, and we talk about the fact that, well, the good old days, we had a behavioral health system before Ronald Reagan dismantled it. What I say to those folks is, prove us wrong, don't assume us wrong. What I say to those folks, there were only 2 votes in opposition, bipartisan support in one of the most progressive legislatures in America. What I say to those folks is that we actually address every one of their considerations and concerns, notably this. They don't support conservatorships. They don't support substituted care. This is not substituted care. This is supportive care with the individual, a care plan, due process, a public defender and a supporter. There's housing components and service components. It's not coercive. It's not locked. It's not custodial. So every one of their fundamental grievances misses the mark in terms of this proposal. And we haven't even implemented, and they're already going to assume it's wrong. What's wrong has been their advocacy for 40, 50 years that's painted the conditions that we're experiencing on the streets and sidewalks, because at the end of the day, talking about the way the world should be doesn't make it so. You got to actually go out and do the hard work. This is about doing the hard work.
Going out there doing the hard work, what do you say to business owners who are fed up and say not enough is being done out in these streets?
Well, I say look at that statement, rip it up, now look at our proposal and support it. We are giving them hope, a new paradigm, not just a thinking of doing, action, not just passion, vision, plan, accountability, support, 3 branches of government, unprecedented, recognizing the paradigm, the problem, the scale, now with strategies and solution, and what we hope is proven results as we implement this over a 24-month period to every county in California.
AB 257, the fast food worker bill. Controversial. Why did you sign it?
Because there's sectors of our economy where workers don't have a voice, where they don't have choice, where their health and safety are often compromised. Disproportionate number of women and minorities work in that sector, and it's not just all teenagers working for a few hours a week to make their way up. You have moms, people working 20 years in fast food industry, and they're stuck. And so we wanted to create some sectoral bargaining to give folks a little bit of a leg up, give them a little opportunity, a wage that actually they can afford to not go on local county welfare or state or federal welfare. And I think this approach is a good approach. We're not going up to $22 an hour. That was just the headlines. This affords that as a cap, but it has to be approved as a stair-stepping process over a period of time. It goes through a council that's equally balanced, legitimately equally balanced between workers and advocates of business and franchisees. And we think it's a new approach that could have a paradigm shift across the country in a sector of our economy where, frankly, a lot of people's voices have not been heard. And a lot of workers have not been treated as well. Many have. Some remarkable leaders in the space and franchisees, remarkable leaders and franchisees. But a lot that, frankly, are not as committed to their workforce as I think they could be.
What do you say to the small business owners and franchise owners who are worried about the $22 an hour?
I think first of all, what I can say is that I got an In-N-Out burger right down the block that's offering $22 today and can't even find workers. I mean, the minimum wage, they blew past that in this economy some time ago. They're just having a hard time finding workers, understandably so. Workers are saying, what do you got for me? Are you going to give me a voice in terms of the quality of my work? Do I have an opportunity to talk about my shifts? Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner. Thank you. Thank you for your entrepreneurial spirit. Thanks for putting your capital on the line. But as a worker, I also have a lot of choice, and I would like to express that through having opportunity to have a career, not just a paycheck, and maybe I can contribute more substantively to your bottom line and the return on your investment. And that's all we're offering. It's a different pathway. This is the same argument, by the way, and these arguments are well defined, that is pushed our minimum wage to 30 or 40-year lows in terms of the value of that wage compared to the value of the dollar. And so I'm someone that's long supported an increase in the minimum wage. We're proud of that. It's growth and inclusion. And I'll just note, California has the highest minimum wage, among the highest in the country. We had the 3rd highest GDP in America, 7.8%, respect to places like Texas, not even close. The country, 5.7% last year, 7.8% in California, $101.4 billion surplus last year, more business starts, more venture capital in California last year, more economic activity than all but a couple nations in terms of economic output. California has a different model, different approach. Growth and inclusion, I think, is a better paradigm.
Dow just had its worst day in over 2 years, thanks in part to yesterday's hot CPI number. How does California view inflation? Well,
like everybody else, it's devastating to workers' wages and people's pocketbooks, not only in the short term, but in terms of the value of the dollar as it relates to their long-term investments. It's having an impact on the housing market and affordability across the spectrum. That's why the state of California, proud, took a portion of that surplus. We'll be handing out $9.5 billion of stimulus checks to help offset the cost of food and gas and inflation. One of the largest stimulus programs we know of anywhere in America. Last year we did another $9 billion, so close to $20 billion over a 2-year period, direct into people's pockets, upwards of $1,050 in this round, $1,500 in last year's round, to try to offset and obviate those stresses as we work through this global inflationary crisis that plays itself out here uniquely in America on the basis of many different factors.
You're vocal no on Prop 30.
Yeah.
You just appeared in an ad.
Yeah.
Why, and what do you think is Lyft's real motive here?
Well, I don't know why we're doing a big tax increase in California when we're running record surpluses, record reserves, record economic growth, 7.8% last year. They're doing it because they want to use those tax dollars to direct them, not to health and human services, not to mental health, not to schools, not to child care, not to roads and bridges. They want to direct it in a self-directed way to what they need, and that's to convert their old gas fleets and their drivers' fleets into electric fleets. And we're not going to subsidize that. I don't think it's right to subsidize a corporation by direct dealing to address an issue they claim to be addressing that no other state in America has addressed at the scale that we're addressing. $53.9 billion. We just signed a budget 3 weeks ago. $54 billion, $53.9 billion climate budget, $10 billion specifically for electric vehicle. We've been leaders internationally, 2035 EV goal. And so they're professing to solve for that when in fact we're doing that by taxing people at a time where we're already vulnerable to the macroeconomic headwinds and a time when wealthy folks in particular have many more options nationally as it relates to alternative states. So I think it's a terrible, terrible initiative, terrible timing, and that's why I personally am appearing in these ads in opposition, because we need to defeat Prop 30.
2035 EV goal,
yeah.
Yet the grid is strained.
Yeah.
Can we build enough renewable energy in time to make this happen?
Absolutely, we're doing it. We've done 4,000 megawatts just in the last 24 months. We've had issues, obviously, related to the drought that's impacted hydroelectricity. Those factored into our decision to extend the life of our last remaining nuclear plant, which is about 9% of our electricity baseload. But let's level set. You had a 10-day period, flex alert period, unprecedented in California's history, unprecedented impact on our electricity load. We had almost 52,000 megawatts at peak, which is unprecedented, again, in our state's history. And that only reinforces that we've got to not just keep up, we've got to jump ahead of Mother Nature and move this transition forward more aggressively, and we are committing to do that. Here's 2 things we did this year. Part of that $54 billion climate package includes billions and billions of dollars for new green energy, including substantively our batteries, which are a fundamental foundational block to our transition. And batteries were saved us from any rolling blackout. We did not have any blackouts. Look at what happened in Texas last year. All coal and gas, 3 days, $100+ billion of economic damage. Up to 700 people lost their lives. I didn't hear that in the Wall Street Journal when they did their editorial about California's clean energy. How about the dirty energy policies there? And they couldn't keep the lights on for 3 full days. We didn't have any blackouts in California. Ron DeSantis, you were wrong again. You made it up. A lot of people made it up. Folks on Fox, you made it up. I know you wished it happened. Trust me, many of them did, because they want to kill our green energy transition. They want to double down on stupid and continue to drill and actually do more damage and get us more deep in the mess that we created that we're trying to get out of, which is the hot's getting much hotter, the dry's getting much drier, and the extremes that are self-evident not just here in California, but all over the western United States and around the world as it relates to climate change. So we want to solve for that. We don't want to subsidize the problem that we're trying to get out of. We want to move away from fossil fuels. I don't want to worry about what they say in something called OPEC, some board meeting in the Middle East, and now that's going to impact my pocketbook. We're done with that. And that's why we're going to move ahead in this transition. Last word. It's a stubborn fact that has not been presented by all those oil interests, which are all the folks that I mentioned, many folks in the Republican Party that are subsidized by the oil industry, and they're on their talking points, that at peak, the current, we have more electric vehicles than any other state in America. At peak, our electric vehicles consume 0.4% of all electricity. 0.4. At peak. We can absorb that. George Will, he needs to get educated on this as well. Heard him on MSNBC today. At peak, based on our current projections in 2035, the entire fleet is not going to convert by 2035. And by the way, whether you like our first in the nation mandate on alternative fuel vehicles or not, that's where this puck's going. All these automobile companies are getting rid of all the old gas and tailpipe. They're already moving in this direction. So this is something for the rest of the world to address, not just California. But at peak, by 2035, it's going to be 4%. Not 94, 4%. 0.4 to 4%. So the answer to your question, I could give it succinctly. We have 13, 14 years to do what we need to do. Absolutely, we'll get there on the other side. Clean, green, more abundant, and cheaper. And have the opportunity to finally clean our air and finally disconnect ourselves from any obligations overseas that purely were driven because of petropolitics.
State budget surplus driven by huge capital gains, largely from record IPOs. This year, no IPOs, the market is down, which means we're unlikely to see much capital gains. What does that mean for your next year's surplus, and how do you make up for that?
Well, I don't anticipate any. We had a $76.3 billion operating surplus that didn't include any federal money 2 years ago. I'll repeat that. $76.3 billion. This last fiscal year we just closed a few weeks ago, $101.4 billion operating surplus. I submitted to the legislature a budget where 99% of that surplus we would set aside for one-time purposes. Paying down pension obligations, close to $20 billion we've committed to paying down pension obligations. $20 billion over the last 2 years for tax rebates, one time. And we made a deal with the legislature where we would set aside even more money than we're statutorily required to in our rainy day reserve, and then have flexibility with our one-time spending over the next 3 to 5 years that we can pull back some of that spending or convert it to debt financing in the next few years to deal with the volatility that we absolutely anticipated and expect that now has been underscored by a $4.2 billion decline in our August forecast that we're about to submit, which is about what we expected when we started to see the volatility pursuant to the Fed's actions and the market volatility that we've been experiencing, not just this week acutely on one particular day, but the volatility we've been experiencing for the last couple of months and the expectation of more volatility with more Fed action that may even go beyond what the current markets have priced in.
You've been running TV ads in Florida and Texas using your own campaign money. What's in it for you?
I get to sleep at night. I get to sleep at night pushing back against bullies like Ron DeSantis. Who, sit there waxing on about freedom, but can be raped by your stepfather and you don't have a freedom as a young girl to get your reproductive care taken care of. Talk about draconian. He's banning books. Attacks the Special Olympics, threatens them with $27 billion or $1 million in fines. He's othering LGBT students, and he's being celebrated for that. So I get to sleep at night, pushing back against that, pushing back against those that have a zest for demonization, those that bully other people, that attack private sector, not just the public sector. Look what he did. Talk about free enterprise in Florida? Ask the Tampa Bay Rays about free enterprise. Ask Disney about free enterprise. Ask corporate boardrooms that literally have had their speech restricted about what they can say or not say as it relates to the LGBT community. Are rewriting history, quite literally. Not just banning books, but rewriting the books in their own image. So I'm expressing myself there and against Greg Abbott. They don't even get me started with Greg Abbott and some of these other governors. You saw what Lindsey Graham did this week. We know exactly what these guys want to do. They don't believe in your freedom. They don't believe in your rights. They don't believe you're an equal citizen, by definition. This would never happen to men. These attacks are because you're a woman. Period. Full stop. Would never happen. And it galls me. People without uteruses coming out there and dictating the terms. 15 weeks. 20. We'll decide. That's not freedom. It's not the America I grew up in. The rights revolution's being wiped out in real time. Across the spectrum, you can't take for granted civil rights and voting rights. You can't take for granted contraceptive care in this country, interracial marriage, interracial relationships, maybe generally same-sex relationships. I don't know where they'll go. Don't think I'm being hyperbolic. You've seen the action by these governors and the action by the Supreme Court and a member of the court that asserted just as much. And then someone like Graham that just doubles down on it in the middle of all this. It's a serious moment. So what I get out of it is the ability to look my kids in the eye and say, I did my best, kids. And I want to leave this world a better place. And I'm fighting like hell because of my lifetime. So much progress was made and it's being wiped out in real time. I'm fighting like hell at least to save what we've got as we try to do more and do better. But I don't like these guys. I don't like what they're doing to other people. And I don't like bullies. That's what it's all about.
And saving what we got, I know you've donated to some candidates. These are Gavin Newsom ads. Is it a potential setup for a presidential bid?
It's literally me taking advantage of a moment that I'm in. Look, I had to raise, I think we put over $80 million to defend ourselves in a recall last year. These guys nationalized a recall campaign against me. This guy Mike Huckabee, some former governor, Newt Gingrich, the RNC, did that. They went after us. They went after our values, went after our people, went after things we hold dear in this state. And I'm pushing back. And I've got my reelection. I'm keeping my eye on that ball. I am keeping my eye on that ball. We recognize the urgency in the moment on homelessness and issues of crime, which, by the way, are not unique in California by any stretch of the imagination. But we're holding ourselves to account on those issues. At the same time, we highlight what's happening, not just in D.C., but in West Virginia and Oklahoma, what's happening in Ohio, where they allow for genital inspections to decide. Republicans passed a bill where they can check the genitals of a young person to decide whether or not they can compete in a sport. You can't make this stuff up. And forgive me for even bringing that up. But what's going on is serious, and people need to wake up to it. It's not who's up and who's down in the polls, and Kamala this, and Joe Biden this, or where's Elizabeth on that, and Buttigieg's going to what? It's not about that. It's not DeSantis this or Trump that. It's what's really happening today, not in our politics, but in the policy that's being advanced state after state, right after right. That's evaporating and disappearing in real time. Wake up, folks. Wake up to what the hell is going on in this country. And I'll do more ads if I have to. I'll raise more money. If I get kicked out, I'll still be doing it to raise awareness. It has nothing to do with anything else except that. Being accountable to living in this moment and not regretting that I didn't lean into this moment and call out, at least from my humbler perspective. Good people can disagree about what I think is going wrong in this country.